Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer. Lawsuits are mounting against the manufacturer of inferior vena cava filters, small devices implanted into patients to help catch blood clots before these clots enter the patient's lungs. The lawsuits claim that the devices might be causing more harm than good. One manufacturer of these filters, CR Bard, has already settled cases shortly after trial due to the information presented from the company's own documents. They knew once the jury saw those documents that they'd have some problems. So tonight, we'll show you these documents, and we'll tell you everything you need to know about these potentially deadly devices.
This is a classic whistleblower case within the pharmaceutical industry. Fraud. Democracy is convinced by this company was that what you're doing is wrong.
IVC filters were designed to catch blood clots before they move to the lungs. They're typically implanted when the patient has a history of pulmonary embolism or deep vein thrombosis. When you review the lawsuits that have been filed against the manufacturers of these filters, it's easy to conclude that the devices are likely causing more harm than good in patients. So here's the problem. When a patient has surgery, one of the most significant dangers is the development of blood clots. They can travel to the lungs and cause pulmonary embolism, or clots that can travel to the brain and cause death. IVC filters were designed to prevent that, and that's a good thing. The filters implanted in the patient's arteries where they're meant to catch blood clots before they reach the vital organs. The filter's supposed to be retrievable and easily removed after they serve their purpose. But according to hundreds of lawsuits that have been filed, many of these filters are fracturing inside the patient, sending small needle-like shards of metal throughout the entire body, causing severe internal lacerations. Other lawsuits show that the entire IVC filter migrates throughout the body and causes as much damage or even more damage than a severe clot. As we see in the overwhelming majority of these defective medical device cases and drug cases, the company was well aware of the dangers and chose to keep that secret, even though there were alternatives that would provide the same kind of anti-clotting protection for patients with much less risk. According to documents from a lawsuit filed against CR Bard, the company knew that their filter had as much higher rate of failure than other similar devices. They knew that from the beginning. Their own documents showed that their retrievable filter had a fracture rate 5 times higher than an alternative filter, and that their brand of filters was 13 times more likely to fail than other types of retrievable filters. According to documents, that information was presented to the company on December 15th, 2004. But even 6 months before that, the company had already provided media training for its employees to deal with the controversy surrounding its products. So they already clearly knew how serious the problem was. In May 2004, employees with the company were told how to handle questions about the failure and dangers of these filters. Documents showed that the company schooled employees on how to route telephone calls from reporters that were asking questions about what they should do. And they were told to preempt any negative stories about their failing products. So, fast forward from May 2004, and you would think that Bard would have done at least one of two things: pull the product from the market or replace the defective filter with one that doesn't cause death. But as I speak tonight, CR Bard has done neither. In fact, the problem exists, it's been there for so long that even the dysfunctional FDA sent the company a letter in July 2015 telling them that their reports of health problems with their filter was dangerously inadequate, and they even questioned whether they were being honest about the numbers of people being harmed by this product. Another classic case of a corporation putting profit above safety. For the rest of the story, let's go to Howard Nations, a member of the Trial Lawyer Hall of Fame, preparing to go to trial against the IVC manufacturers very soon. Howard, there's a team of lawyers throughout the country trying to solve this defective filter problem. How many attorneys are working on this case as we speak?
I'd say we have 200 to 300 lawyers actively working on this. In the MDL litigation in Arizona, there are 20 firms in the leadership role, And then the same thing in Indiana, there are 20 firms there, and then there's a group in California in that litigation. And the good news is that you have some of the finest mass tort and pharmaceutical lawyers and medical device lawyers in America working on this very diligently.
Well, the reason I asked the question, I want the viewers to understand how extensive this problem is. This isn't just an isolated case, and the damages are horrible. Would you explain what happens with this product when it goes bad?
Well, the injuries are the function of the failure mode, and there's several different failure modes. First of all, you have migration, which the entire filter can move up to the heart and cause death. Next, you have perforation, one of the most frequent injuries, where the sharp legs on the filter that are designed to hold it in place actually perforate through the vena cava and into the adjoining organs. Now, the adjoining organs include such things as the aorta. You can imagine perforating the aorta, the problems there, or the adjoining bowel. The next thing, which is a very severe and dangerous failure, or the fractures. Fractures are dangerous because you may have them and not even know it. And the fracture is where the legs, very sharp ends, the legs break off and move through the bloodstream into the heart or lungs most frequently, or into other places also. The problem you get into with fractures is that the fracture rate is 5 years after implantation. So people may have a IVC filter that was put in 2010. They say, well, you know, I haven't had any problem with it. Everything's fine with mine. Let me give you a quick story. In 2009, a client of mine had a filter put in place. She's a nurse. 6 years later, she had no problems. 6 years later, she was rushed to a cardiac care unit. They did emergency open heart surgery. They had to go in and find a leg that had fractured and was perforating her pericardium. So her pericardium, the sac around the heart, was bleeding and filling up the sac. She flatlined on the table. They managed to drain the blood. They managed to save her life. And then when they took the filter out 6 days later, there's still another leg missing. So she's got one of those struts moving around in her body, and she may have to go through this whole thing again. So the fact that you've had one in for 5 years doesn't mean anything.
Okay, one thing for sure, Howard, from what I'm seeing on the case that you're working up, the company clearly knew. These companies understood the problem with this fracturing. They understood that it could have the potential to lacerate organs in the body and move throughout the entire body. When did they find out, and what did they do when they found out?
Well, this started with the race to get approval of the retrievable device. The original device was permanent. So there was a race between Bard and Cook to have a retrievable device. So Bard did a scientific study, a clinical trial. Usually a clinical trial for something, especially a new product, would involve at least 300 patients, and it'd be done in multi-centers. This particular one was 33 patients. It was done in Canada, and it was really designed not for safety and efficacy. It was designed to test only retrievability. In that 33 patient trial, they had one migration on patient number 9, and they had 2 fractures in patient 33. Now, with those kind of results in only 33 patients, they knew very well that they needed to have a large study, at least 300 people. They did not do so. They went straight to the FDA with that retrieval-only study, and they got clearance from the FDA. And they never really determined the cause of the fractures or the cause of the migration. So when it was put on the market, it was the recovery device. When it was put on the market, over the next few months of it being on the market, there were migrations, and there were 13 migration deaths that were recorded, and there were 87 fractures. And all the time that they were working on that, they were designing the product to correct the problems that they knew they had, but instead of not putting it on the market until those problems had been corrected, they left it on the market with all the deaths and resulting injuries as a result of it.
Howard, let me ask you this. Is this even a necessary product? I mean, we see time and time again the industry creating needs for products. Is this even a necessary product, Are there alternatives that can be used to solve the problem where we don't get into things like we're talking about here?
That's a very insightful question, Pat, because first of all, you have anticoagulation therapy, which is used to avoid to dissolve clots as a regular therapeutic remedy. But there is no scientific evidence ever done, ever perceived, ever produced by anyone that shows any efficacy of the IVC filter. On the other hand, they are prothrombotic. They create the problem that they're designed to stop. You can have a filter in place that's tilted, and blood can accumulate around the tilt, and a clot can form there, and it can create the blood clot, cut it loose, and send it in a form of pulmonary embolism in the lungs. So, are they efficacious? No, there's no proof of it. Are they prothrombotic and dangerous? Yes.
Okay, and the company, I suppose, is making a lot of money with this. They know trials coming up. At this point, as you're looking at these documents, what do you say is the real story that you're seeing in these documents? In about a minute, give me your quick take on what the documents are telling you that the jury's really going to react to in this case.
Well, what the documents are telling us is that, first of all, there was a race to put this on the market. And in the race to put it on the market, they did not do the type of testing they needed. They did get the type of fractures, the migration, the type of injuries that you could expect in the future. They did not find a root cause analysis of that. In order to solve that problem, you have to get to a root cause analysis. They never got to a root cause analysis, as a result of which they did not solve the problem. They put it on the market so they could be the first out, the first on the market. They did not warn the doctors about their findings. They went ahead, despite migration after migration causing death. They were getting about one migration death per month, and it still remained on the market. They never withdrew it. They were getting fracture upon fracture upon fracture. They left it on the market. They never withdrew it.
20 seconds is all we got. They could pull this off the market anytime if they wanted to. 20 seconds. Tell me if that's true.
They could absolutely pull it off the market until they corrected it, because they knew immediately what was wrong with it, and they started designing the fixes into their next product, which was the G2. And the whole time they're designing the fixes and design modalities changing, they were still selling the one they knew was bad. And it's egregious. It's outrageous conduct. And the other outrageous part of it is the FDA approved this product despite the fact that it was a 33-patient study.
Howard, thank you for joining me. Go after him, my friend. Go after him. Coming up, we'll speak with the host and creator of the Young Turks, Cenk Uygur, about the unresolved legal issues surrounding the Dakota Access Pipeline. Stay tuned. This man is brilliant.
I'm Larry King, and you are watching RT America. Question more.
I'm Governor Jesse Ventura, and you're watching RT America. Question more.
I'm Tom Hartman, and I'll give you what the mainstream media can't, the big picture.
There's been no charges filed against you.
And when you question more, you find what you're looking for.
This is the legislative branch of
We'll go deeper, investigate, and debate, all so you can get the big picture.
For decades, the American middle class has been railroaded by Washington politics. Big money corporate interest has drowned out a lot of voices. That's how it is in the news culture in this country now. That's where I come in. I'm Ed Schultz. I do the news on RT America. I'll make sure you don't get railroaded, and you'll get the straight talk and the straight news. Question more.
Despite a hard-fought victory in the halting of the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline, activists at Standing Rock, the reservation, are staying put. Many protesters fear the victory is only temporary and that it's only a matter of time before the company starts building that pipeline again. And they resume construction, nothing changes. That's what they're afraid of. Joining me now to discuss whether this is a legal possibility is co-host and creator of the Young Turks Media Network and attorney Cenk Uygur, an all-around very sharp guy. Cenk, how are you?
Great. Thank you, Pep. I appreciate it.
I want to ask you this. What factors do you think made the Obama administration and the Army Corps of Engineers cave into the demands of these protesters to halt this pipeline? What happened?
Well, I think there were three factors. One, and most importantly, was the protesters themselves. They just would not relent. And whether it was brutally freezing temperatures, assault by the police there, basically acting as the Pinkertons of the modern-day era, they just would not give in. That's why it's called Standing Rock, and they stood like a rock there. Second of all, the media. We went to go cover it. Now, of course, mainstream media didn't. Corporate media was nowhere near it. But, for example, Young Turks sent Jordan Chariton, our reporter, there 5 different times. And videos that we made were spread all across social media, seen tens of millions of times. And then celebrities started to go up there, and we recorded all of that, and that got put in all the papers. And then the third angle was the veterans for Standing Rock. These guys, led by Wes Clark and Michael Wood, organized initially 2,000 and what wound up being 4,000 veterans to go act as they put it, human shields for the water protectors. And when the veterans were going to show up, all of a sudden, after all the media attention, and the protesters who would not yield, and the veterans come, the Obama administration decided, hey, you know what? Maybe we should do something about this. I think that it was a combination of those factors that woke them up.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you think this growing and this very powerful movement should go from here, Cenk? What happens next?
Well, look, there's this particular issue. Then there's the issue of oil pipelines all across the country. And then the third part of it is civil disobedience, I believe, at large. So first, on Dakota Access Pipeline, unfortunately, this fight is nowhere near over because we found out today that Rick Perry is going to be named the Secretary of Energy. Rick Perry is on the board of Energy Transfer Partners, who owns the Dakota Access Pipeline. The corruption is so brazen. I've never seen anything like this. So Trump, who owns shares in the Dakota Access Pipeline, puts a guy who's on the board of the Energy Transfer Partners, and so they're likely to want to continue to profit off of it. But the veterans said, hey, you know, there was 4,000 of us. Now there's going to be next time 10,000 of us. So this pipeline issue continues.
After the decision to halt the pipeline was made, Public Energy Transfer Partners and Sunoco Logistics responded. I mean, they came out and said, this is the quote, they fully expect to complete construction of the pipeline without any additional rerouting. Nothing this administration has done changes that in any way. I mean, have you ever seen such arrogance by a corporation that says, you know, we really don't care what the government says. We really don't care what the president says. We're going to do this anyway. Isn't that the attitude that this rogue company has had from the very beginning of this project?
Well, that's exactly right. And I'm asking the officials and the police in North Dakota to turn around. What I mean by that is the Army Corps of Engineers has very clearly stated that they do not have permission to drill and that they're going to do an environmental impact statement which could take months and sometimes even years to conclude. So if the company is saying, as they are now, that we are 100% going to drill, then the police shouldn't be facing the protesters. They should be facing towards the company.
Cenk, what I find incredible is that this company has this attitude that they're bulletproof, that nothing can happen to them. They can do what they want to do. Had it not been for what you did with social media and what other people did in social media, corporate media would not even shown up for this. Did I get that right, or am I overstating it?
No, I honestly think that's absolutely right. We had one video that did over 7 million views on Facebook, and it's been spread all throughout the internet. And people know about Standing Rock now, but they get confused as to where they heard it from because they did not hear it on CNN or any of the other corporate media. They only show up at the very end. Oh, they're like, oh, veterans are coming. And then they'll, you know, come in and buy up all the hotel rooms and pay exorbitant rates. With our ragtag crew of real reporters, investigative reporters, we cover that story from beginning to end, and now it's a national story. And I just feel like there's so much more we can do. Today a spill happened, or we found out about a spill that happened in North Dakota of 176,000 gallons of oil. What happened? I thought they said it couldn't spill. So we'll send reporters there. And wherever there's news like that, if the corporate media isn't going to show up, no problem. Young Turks will show up.
And we thank you for that. The violence, was it as bad as we think it was when we saw some of that footage where the violence against these protesters was, first of all, unnecessary and way in excess of what had to happen? What was your take?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's this arrogant attitude that you were talking about earlier, Pap, where they think, well, I'm entitled to federal land where the Army Corps of Engineers actually has authority. I don't really care. They feel like they own the government. And your burial land, your water, the Missouri River, where they get water not just for the reservation, but for so much of that area in North Dakota. And they feel like that's just mine to take. In Iowa, there's all these farmers that are fighting back, conservative rural farmers, because they do eminent domain. And they say, well, the government's going to back me up, so you're going to give me your property. In another pipeline down in Texas, the judge had to increase the amount that that particular pipeline was paying to the landowners by 30 times. Because they felt like, what's the difference? I'm just going to take your land and not even pay you for it and anywhere near fair market value. And so the violence that they did against those protesters was part of that same entitlement. I'm entitled to have you not exercise your rights and get off of your land so that I could build this pipeline. And they did the tear gas canisters, they did the water cannons in freezing temperatures. One woman nearly lost her arm. On the Young Turks, we covered another woman who was blinded in one eye. This is way disproportionate to what should have happened.
Cenk, Uygur, thank you for being out there. I really, really appreciate it. All Americans should appreciate you being out there. Since the election, all anyone can seem to talk about is fake news, but the term has become so widely applied that one website was called Prop or Not, has labeled everything from leftist websites like truthdig.com to libertarian websites like the Ron Paul Institute as distributors of fake news and propaganda. This in turn allows actual fake news culprits to get off the hook. So here to talk about the legal issues surrounding this fake news phenomenon is executive editor of Trial Lawyer magazine, Farron Cousins. Farron, what's your take on this whole development?
Well, I think it's really interesting. You know, I've worked for a couple different news outlets, and I know that my editors would never allow anything to be printed or published or what have you without credible sources, usually 2 or 3 or 4 sources to back up everything you're saying. And so the fake news epidemic that's actually happening right now is very real. But I have to say there is a big difference between the fake news epidemic that Hillary Clinton spoke about a couple weeks ago, where she wanted to make it all about her. We have real fake news sites out there like Breitbart.com that almost got people killed with this phony Pizzagate story. So there's a big difference between Hillary Clinton's crusade against fake news sites saying that she's sick or ill or, you know, otherwise incapacitated during the election. That's what she's mad about. It's trying to misdirect everything. We need to focus on the sites like Breitbart that are actually out there putting people in harm's way by making up phony stories about John Podesta being tied to some kind of a pizza pedophile chain out there.
Let me ask you something. First of all, the Podesta story, as much as I think the guy, he caused so much problems for the DNC, I'm anything but a fan of Podesta. But the truth is, he could bring a pretty good lawsuit in that particular case. There's something called negligence per se, or slander per se, is what this would be considered. Slander per se, where he can sue without really even having to show actual damages. Damages in that particular case, the type of damages are already going to be there. But he was accused basically of being a pedophile, wasn't he?
He was. And, you know, John Podesta, even though he is a public figure, there are some things you can't just falsely attack somebody for. Being a pedophile or any kind of, you know, maybe he's got an STD, you cannot say things like that. And that's exactly what Breitbart wanted to do, was say that he was linked, but somehow involved in some sort of pedophilia ring that involved pizza restaurants. Podesta has a phenomenal lawsuit that he could easily file, easily win it, and essentially bankrupt Breitbart.com if he chooses to go forward. The same thing goes with this Comet Ping Pong restaurant in Washington, D.C., where the shooting happened. They could sue Breitbart because they said they were involved in a pedophilia ring, which turned out to be completely untrue.
Slander's a tough case. Let me sum this up. Slander's a tough case. I mean, you've got a lot of things you have to show, but when you're making accusations like the ones that have been made against Podesta here, being accused of that type of conduct, it's easier to get to even if you're a public figure. Even the New York Times case kind of controls all that, but if you're a public figure and you have been hit with that type of statement, you got a pretty good slander case. Farron Cousins, thank you for joining us. This case is going to continue to develop as we go. Finally, tonight, a rare victory for America's truck drivers. A California jury has ruled in favor of more than 800 Walmart truckers seeking back pay for activities like taking rest breaks, washing their trucks, and waiting for transfers at local locations. The total damages, $54 million. During the trial, Walmart argued that they didn't have to pay their truckers during the rest breaks because they weren't under the company's control. Keep in mind, truckers are legally required to take a 10-hour rest after 11 hours on the road. That kind of policy makes good sense. As a matter of fact, look no further than the Walmart truck that nearly killed comedian Tracy Morgan and did kill his friend James McNair in 2014. This decision should serve as a wake-up call and force corporations like Walmart to better take care of their employees. And that's our show. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at America's Lawyer. And watch all of our episodes online, youtube.com/RTAmerica. Next week, we'll bring you more stories that corporate media won't tell you. Until then, have a great night.